Why is everything so weird now? From movies and art to architecture, politics, and just everything in general. Why does it all feel so different, surreal, at times even unbelievably strange? The president is a felon celebrity billionaire, again. The world is burning down and people think it's a conspiracy. The internet is overrun by AI and disinformation bots. Everyone is unfathomably stupid. And worst of all, in this timeline, we don't even get the cool bad guys. We instead get the nerdy, lame ones.
I knew one day I'd have to watch powerful men burn the world down. I just didn't expect them to be such losers.
No matter your opinion of politics or just the modern world in general, one thing is obvious. The weirdness is getting too weird. I think we can all agree that everything just feels so off, and every time we see a new headline, it feels like we are living in a satirical version of reality. But one that is so satirical, it feels too on the nose. Like if it were a movie, it would flop for being too cheesy and unrealistic. In this video, I want to talk about how the strangeness of the modern world is no accident, but the result of four main factors. The rise of mass mental illness and how it's reflected in our art, media, and culture at large, late-stage capitalism and how it waters everything down to its most basic, efficient, commodifiable aspects, the attention economy and how it incentivizes out-of-pocket, weird behavior for visibility and profit, and lastly, how immense wealth inequality leads to imbecilic, unqualified people in positions of great power and influence.
Why does everything feel so weird now?
1% of America has 40% of all the nation's wealth.
This is Boston City Hall, completed in 1865. It was one of the first buildings built in the French Second Empire style in America, and is defined by European Baroque influence, symmetry, order, and balance. The building focuses on verticality, drawing the eye upward, and features rich ornamentation and palatial design, with these features helping reflect grandeur and prestige. This is the new Boston City Hall, completed in 1968, and it is honestly one of the ugliest buildings I ever had to walk past when I lived in Boston. The new Boston City Hall is built in the highly controversial brutalist style, characterized by simple, blocky shapes, exposed concrete, and a lack of ornamentation. I think the stark contrast between these two buildings reflects one of the most common upsets today. How and why did we go from this to this? Now, when it comes to architecture, I know many may point to art movements and how they tend to reject what came before them in a bid to be novel and refreshing, but I would still also point out that in a capitalistic world, profit has become the number one objective.
So concrete is sturdy and cheap.
The ornate styles of the past become an unnecessary expense, and the cultural or artistic justifications behind them become seen as redundant and inessential. Because of the erosion of culture or objectivity due to things like postmodernism and neoliberal capitalism, art also becomes more unrestrained, possibly as unrestrained as it has ever been due to not needing to follow some cultural rule that previously justified its importance. This means everything and anything goes, leading to experimentation becoming commonplace, with the dominant values of maximizing profit incentivizing cheap, non-ornamental, lazy architecture. When it comes to how disliked modern architecture is or how uninspiring it can be, I wish there was more to talk about, but it literally is just capitalism. Culture and art are out, shareholders and maximizing profit are in. In this same way, why are some of the most popular movies today so strange, campy, or surreal? Why do so many of the characters who are beloved by society seem so unhinged or mentally unstable? As I already discussed in more depth in a previous video, I think this cultural adoption of the unhinged in popular media reflects a mass, societal, psychological breakdown occurring in real time. I think the popularity of movies like Pearl, American Psycho, The Substance, and others reflects deeper truths about modern society, from a fed-up mentality due to social injustice to just plain mental exhaustion. Remember, art is a tool to express the human experience, and whatever form or type of it is the most popular at a given time can kind of be seen as a way to check the pulse of a society.
These grim scenes, reminiscent of the Great Fire of London nearly 3 centuries ago, were taken from the roof of St. Paul's.
After the World Wars, art movements like Surrealism, Abstract Expressionism, or Dadaism gained popularity in response to the incomprehensible atrocities of the war. Before the World Wars, people had more of a modernist perception of the world, or one that posits that progress is inevitable, that technology and human reason will surely lead to better conditions for all people, that government institutions and diplomacy can save the world, and perceived the arrow of history as strictly linear, unstoppable in its advancement towards utopia. The horrors of World War II shattered this optimistic worldview and showed people the dark side of human rationality and technology. From the Japanese and Germans believing in eugenics and superior races, to using new technologies to orchestrate the first industrial genocide, people quickly realized the world was far more complex than the optimistic fantasy that modernism provided. We can see this harsh reality reflected in the popular art movements immediately following the war. Surrealism, which began before World War II but quickly grew in prominence during and after it, focused on the human subconscious and trauma. Artists like Max Ernst or Salvador Dali used bizarre, dreamlike imagery that mirrored the absurdity of the new post-war world. Surrealism became one of the ways to process the horrors of war and the fragility of reality. Abstract Expressionism, which is defined by spontaneity, abstract technique, and favors emotional expression over realistic representation, can also be seen as a reflection of the attempts to process the war. The emphasis on emotional expression can be seen as a rejection of the order and rationale of previous traditions in favor of raw, creative expression. The move from balance and order to chaos and abstraction mirrors a mass shift in perspective as people try to understand and cope with the horrors of World War II. Dadaism is probably one of the most viscerally political art movements. It was loudly anti-bourgeois establishment, anti-traditional, anti-rationality, and heavily leaned into the nonsensical and satirical. Dadaism is probably one of the most obvious reflections of how mass trauma and war affected people's sense of rationality and trust in progress or the institutions of society. In my opinion, it's also fascinating how much the values of this art movement resonate with not just me, but I think many young people today, especially with the emphasis on irony and mocking the elite establishment. I see Dadaism as a metaphoric throwing of the hands into the air and realizing that the injustices in the world are so vast, so incomprehensible, so nonsensical, that it forces anyone who's paying attention to rely on irony and absurdism to process it all. Now, when it comes to the themes we see in art and culture today, particularly the popularity of the Unhinged, I think it is also reflecting a broader trend in society. I think the popularity of the insane can be seen as a direct result of the societal rise in mental illness due to neoliberal capitalism.
I don't want to end up like Mom, or I want to be dancing up on the screen like the pretty girls in the pictures.
Roughly summarized, neoliberal capitalism is socialism for the rich and capitalism for the poor. It rejects government institutions and regulations in favor of free markets, leading to a defunding of public services and social security nets, raising of taxes on the poor, lowering of taxes on the rich, and government subsidies up the ass for corporations. It quite literally creates a dual society where the rich live by different standards and rules while the poor suffer and pay for it all. Neoliberalism not only destroys community and culture in favor of hyper-individual consumerism, but it also causes the quality of life to decline for something like the bottom 90%, while the top 10% continue to amass truly unfathomable amounts of wealth. This leads to a population that is working longer for less, who has no real community or social support, whose quality of life continues to decline, and who now attempts to rely on the cult of the self and consumption for purpose and remedy. Any sociologist or psychologist will tell you that will never work, and so what we now see is an overworked, mentally ill population, and with a rise in mental illness comes a rise in the popularity of the mentally ill or unhinged in art and film. Whereas the impact of the world wars was more instant, clearly leaving its mark on culture and art, the effects of neoliberalism took longer to manifest and pinpoint. Because society has largely been stabilized following the world wars, the economic structures put in place have enjoyed unseen stability, reinforcing their influence within government, and over time crushing any opposition through lobbying and immense capital.
We are the 99%!
The first real crack in this facade was around 2008 with the financial crash, Occupy Wall Street movement, and the election of Obama. And when that didn't bring about any real change, the shattering of it all came with the election of Donald Trump in 2016. In a world where both parties promise radical change, but where nothing ever does, where the average American is socially isolated without a real sense of culture or purpose outside of work, and when the standard of living continues to decline, people will lash out in unexpected ways, supporting things you never thought possible, and relating with others who seem completely out of their mind unhinged. So that's the first reason we see the popularity of unhinged, insane characters or themes in art and culture, but the second has more to do with specifically how capitalism affects art and how people behave, like the rise of the attention economy and the reduction of everything to their most commodifiable components. Once you decentralize everything due to new technologies and mass media, remove objectivity in favor of personal truth, dismantle community and place the individual at the center of society, and destroy culture in favor of consumption, you leave a vacuum that can now be filled with unfettered, hyper-individualistic, pure capitalism. There are no more rules, taking it too far, or a sense of anything outside of consumption and the self. Everything becomes an extension of making money, and no matter what you have to do, who you have to step on, or how distasteful you have to be, as long as you are making profit and benefiting yourself, it doesn't matter. These sorts of ideas wouldn't have been as possible with the restraining nature of things like culture, community, or religion. These things give people a sense of morality, character, and an understanding of something outside of the influences of material, consumption, or profit.
Right now, I'm just trying to get a bus ticket.
One of the most apparent consequences of these ideas is the adoption of pure spectacle for profit and the attention economy. The attention economy is basically the idea that human attention is a limited resource that humans, businesses, and organizations compete for. Due to television and later the internet and social media, advertising has become one of the most dominant ways to make money. And to get your ads exposure, you need to harness the attention of the individual. This new dynamic creates the incentive to be as crazy, loud, strange, or downright outrageous as possible so you can stand out in the endless sea of mass media and content creation. The attention economy is one of the biggest reasons movies, art, and even people on social media seem so unhinged or just hard to comprehend with their weirdness. In a post-culture, post-restraint world where an estimated 1 billion pieces of new content are posted every day, you will find the most strange, surreal, brain rot-like content dominating. When you are competing with such massive amounts of content, complexity and context disappear, and people instead begin to appeal to the most basic, attention-grabbing aspects of the human psyche, including outrage, strangeness, or irony. The popularity and surrealist nature of films like The Substance are a great example of this. While all films rely on plot and good character development for value, they also now rely just as much, if not more, on shock, irony, and strangeness. Again, the formula has been permanently altered to prioritize attention over substance, no pun intended, and attention is neutral. It doesn't matter if you are a hater or a fan. If you have consumed some form of media or content, you have clicked and watched it, therefore inadvertently also consuming their advertisements and giving the creator profit. So in short, capitalism reduces everything to its most fundamental commodifiable aspects, meaning culture, artistic expression, or even personal constraint in the name of decency become inferior to efficiency, profit, and the demands of the attention economy. This means the main theme within popular culture, art, and social behavior becomes spectacle for profit. It doesn't matter if the spectacle is cringe, distasteful, immoral, or just flat out bizarre. As long as it grabs eyes, it's good. The last way neoliberal capitalism contributes to the high strangeness of the modern world has to do with politics, and specifically American politics.
Look, if you hate cops just because they're cops, the next time you get in trouble, call a crackhead.
Why does it seem that incompetence is so common in American society? Why do so many of the people at the top of these powerful institutions or companies seem so unbelievably fucking imbecilic, especially in the so-called meritocracy that America supposedly is? Well, the reason is that America isn't really a meritocracy at all, and that wealth and power have much more to do with privilege, luck, and connections than actual merit or hard work. With neoliberalism 40 plus years baked into the system, we now see its obvious unignorable effects. As wealth and power continue to centralize, the people with access to opportunity don't have to be the best, having the privilege of failure without consequence. They have the privilege of access to higher education and elite connections regardless of real ability or skill. This means that for millions and millions of Americans around the country, their potential is never realized due to a lack of access to opportunity. There are talented, intelligent, groundbreaking minds everywhere in all classes around the world, but when you remove their ability to nurture and realize their skills, that potential expertise ends up being lost forever. The more that wealth gets concentrated, the smaller the group of people who have it, the more likely it is to have unqualified imbeciles in positions of great power and influence. The reason this all seems so strange and even unfathomable to a lot of us is simply because our obvious reality now strongly contradicts the feel-good stories we like to tell ourselves about society. And because it's so undeniably apparent, it becomes hard to comprehend. America is supposed to be this meritocracy. Capitalism is supposed to benefit all people. Rich people worked hard for it and deserve their wealth. Americans care about the common person, minorities, human rights, and would never vote for someone so clearly narcissistic and cruel. These are all stories we have been able to convince ourselves were true until our reality became so undeniably opposite to it. It's a hard pill to swallow and realize that a lot of how you perceive the world was outdated at best, propaganda at worst. So coming back to the main question of this video, why is everything so indescribably weird now? Well, because we live in a world that is run by an economic system that has been largely successful in destroying the tools humans have historically relied on to exist and stay sane. There is no more objective grand narrative that gets us through life and lovingly answers all our questions. Our sense of community has largely been demolished in favor of material and consumption. Our very identities have become commodifiable products detached from any real culture or tradition. And the social contract that justified and moralized how our society even functions has completely collapsed. The thing is, in some ways, the modern world has been weird for quite a while. It's just that the weirdness is now accelerating, and we are just now finally starting to truly recognize it.